Hey guys, back at you here today. Wanted to walk you guys through how to create a tutorial walkthrough using something called UIPageVewController and a page control. It's pretty simple and pretty straightforward. The page view controller is a little bit complicated, but the page control is pretty simple. What it looks like and what we're going to be talking about is just one of those tutorial walkthroughs you see in so many different apps. You got three view controllers in this example, page control at the bottom, swipe to the left or the right, advances, or I guess devances, go backs. We'll go back to the previous view controller. It's gesture based. In this example, you've got these photos that are nice in here, and you've got these labels. So this is kind of what we're going to be doing. We won't add labels or photos, but I'll show you how to implement the page view controller. So essentially, page view controller is a container. So think of this as a huge scroll view in a sense, but it's not. It's basically just a controller that sits in the background that says, okay, this is the first view controller. This is the next one that needs to come if the person swipes to the left. And then if you're on this one, then the page view controller knows that, or as a property rather, that knows that this is the previous one and this is the next one. So if I was to, swipe left or swipe right, it will actually give you the right view controller. So let me walk you through how to do that. Create a simple single view application here, nothing special. I created three view controllers. So we got first VC, second VC, third VC, all the same. Only difference is I added a line to change the color of the view controller. So third is blue, two is green, and the first is red. Nothing fancy. Everything else is boilerplate code that was just given to us from Apple when I created these. I removed the view controller instance that was over here. First thing that we're going to do together is we're going to remove the storyboard because we're not going to use the storyboard. And that's going to prompt us to do something in our app delegate to initialize basically what our root view controller is. Now, the issue with that is we don't want to give it one of these, right? We need to give it the root page view controller container. So we need to create a new view controller to manage these three, the first, second, and third that we're going to use. So we'll just call this, we'll call it root page view controller like that. And it's going to inherit from UIPageVewController. That's going to be the subclass. We'll say next, create, pop up over here. We can remove all this. We don't need it. And this. And we don't need to actually do anything in here yet. I'll copy the name of this because we're going to use it over here. We'll assign our window, because we delinked our storyboard, a new UI window that we want it to actually load with a frame of screen.main.bound. Basically, that just, remember, grabs the orientation or size of the device and sets that window to that size. We need to make the key visible, which sets that window visible. We'll say let page VC, which will be our first view controller of root page view controller. And we'll set a root view controller on our window, which will be root view controller dot just page VC like that. And we'll run this, and this will actually run and not show us anything. It's going to show us a black screen because we haven't actually told this root page view controller what view controllers we want to use, right? We haven't told it, going back to this example, what these are. So let's do that now. So the first thing we're going to do is we'll create an array, lazy var array, okay? And we'll call this view controllers list like this, and it will be an array of type UI view controller. And we'll instantiate it with this closure. And we'll say let VC1 equal our first VC. Let VC2 equal our second VC. Let VC3 equal our third VC. And then we'll return all these into an array. And so you can simply just say return, not equal, sorry. Return VC1, comma, separated, VC2, comma, separated VC3. And that will return that array like so. All right, so we want to basically use some delegates. Oh, and oh my God, I totally just realized I'm in the wrong view controller. So just copy this, remove that. I'm sorry, guys. Pop back over to your root view page view controller, paste the code in there like that. That happens all the time, sometimes. All right, so the first thing we want to actually go ahead and do is we need to, if you go into the UI page view controller, you can see there's several different variables and stuff that we can actually set on it. But there's these delegates we want to use. There's a UIPageViewController delegate and a UIPageViewController data source that we're going to actually end up using. So let's tack those guys onto our class that we're using here. So we'll basically add them in here, PageView data source and UIPageViewController delegate. And so that prompts us to what? Well, set ourself as a data source and set ourself as a delegate. Like so. All right, because we want to be able to implement and call back to these functions that we're going to use. Okay, so the two ones that we want to use for our data source, right, are going to be what's going to be the view controller before and what's going to be the view controller after. Okay, and you can see that these are returning optional view controllers. So I'll just copy this and I'll say these are our delegates, right? And I believe I can just actually change this one to before. I think that's the only difference in it. Like so, right? And we'll tack on the parentheses there as well. I think that should be okay. Okay. And so it's giving us an error because we're not returning anything. So right now we'll just return nil, just so we can get these errors out of the way. Okay, awesome. So how do we basically let our page view controller know about these page view controls, or these view controllers that we're going to actually end up using? So that's pretty simple. We'll just use an if let here, and we'll say our first VC, because we need to basically tell this page view controller when it loads which VC is first, right? And we'll say this will equal our view controllers list and our first view controller that's in there, which in this case, because we loaded this like this, if you dynamically load it, you might want to check that the value is this, but for this case, in this simple example, VC1, okay, is we'll say view controller list first, and what we'll do is we'll assign a property on ourself, which is, or use a method, which is called set view controllers, okay? And you can see it wants a view controller to put here into an array. Okay, so we'll just say, well, that's gonna be that first VC that we're gonna load. And it wants the direction that it's gonna basically go from that point, that starting point. You can do forward or reverse. We'll do forward. Animated true, completion no. Okay, pretty darn simple, right? Okay. The next thing that we want to actually end up doing is going in and modifying these methods, right? So I believe if we fire this one off, start running it, let's go down into setting up our page view controller and basically telling it what is going to be next after this red one. Because right now it doesn't know. It only knows that this red one is the first one. You can see, and it's assigned in there. So we'll close that. We'll come into our after, right? So this would be the one that's going to be after. And we'll just say guard let index, because we need a value that we're going to assign this to, view controller list dot index of, and that will give us an index, basically a range of whatever we wanted in this sense. In this sense, it's going to be the view controller that's passed in, which you can see is coming in right here, right? So this would say, if it's the first one, it's going to say, okay, guard let the index, starting index be 0, for example, because it's just this red one, right, that it's on. And we'll just say else will return nil, like that. Okay. All right. And if that's so, we can assign a variable, and we'll just say next index equal to index, okay, plus 1, right, because this is the one after. Okay. And if that works, we'll just say guard let, or actually, I'm sorry, guard our view controller list, because we need to check our list and check the count of our list is not equal to our next index, else we'll return no. Okay, like that. And then we're going to check also that our count of our view controller list, oops, okay, is greater than the index, I'm sorry, the next index that we're going to be using. Okay, because remember, it's just an integer. Else we'll return no, if that is that case, and unable to be that case. And if that's so, and those are both so, then we can just return, okay, our view controller list, which is our array, with an index number so that it returns one of our controllers, and that will just be our next index, like so. And we can get rid of this. Just like that. Very, very, very simple, right? So we have a few guard statements in here just to ensure that we're not one past the one that we're at. We have another guard statement in here to ensure that, you know, hey, we're not going to pass over a view controller we're already at, you know. That way it just ensures that the flow of going backwards and forwards is, the logic is correct. Okay. Okay. Let's go up here and let's adjust our, what's the one before? Okay. And the way that we're going to do this is somewhat similar, actually. So let's, we'll just copy this first line because we're going to use this index to basically evaluate the items that are in the array. And what we'll do is we will actually, let's add a variable up here so that we can track our current index, because this is going to make it a little bit easier. So we'll just say current index, okay, which is an integer, which is optional, okay? And I think we should also have one that we'll come back to a little bit later, which is going to be, we'll just make this a private actual variable, which will be a pending index. And I'm just going to add this here for now. You can ignore it for a few minutes because it's not going to make any sense. But this is going to be for when we add our page view controller. So I'm just going to add that, just set that up now. But we're not going to actually use that in the page view controller. It's going to be more used for the page view index and the delegate that we'll use on that. So we'll actually just say our current index, okay, which is set effectively to nil at first, right? Is going to be equal to our index, right, that I just, oops. It's going to be equal to our index, which we just defined above, right? And this time it's going to be -1, because remember, this is the one that we're looking at before, okay? And so then what we can do is we can do basically what we were doing before, which is to evaluate, so we'll say guard the current index, evaluate the index being equal to 0, because we want to basically check to make sure it's greater than 0, else we don't want to actually perform or pass in a view controller, right? So we'll return nil here if that's the case. Okay. And then we want to check the count of the, so var, or sorry, guard view controller list dot count. Okay. We want to check that this is greater than our current index, okay, that we're using, else we'll return. Okay, and if that is good, then we'll just simply return our view controller list like we did with our current index number. Okay, and we'll probably, I would say at some point, need to refactor some of this just because we don't want to use these exclamations. You never want to use exclamation points in Swift. And I'll show you guys how we can actually get rid of that a little bit later. But this is just to get this example out the window for you guys. So yeah, so let's actually run this right now and see what we get. So we have our first one, and if we swipe to the right or the left, we should get, oh, look at that. We get all of our view controllers. Now see how they're paging like that? Nice. If I go to my last one, you can see I can't swipe anywhere, but if I go to my first one, I can't swipe anywhere either. Okay, awesome. So we can see that it's actually, the logic is being read correctly. Now, what is this weird curl action that's happening here? Well, that's the default implementation of PageViewController because it, as it notes, page view. It's very simple to like Apple's iBooks, but it's ugly, right? Who would use this? I don't know. Maybe like a note application would be nice. But so what we want to do is we need to use or modify a property which is it's called a transition style, right? Let me see if I can show you guys what it looks like in here. Here it is, transition style. So we need to modify this because I believe that if this is an enum, there, right here, we can use scroll or page curl. Okay, that's great. But it's a get only. So that means when you see get, you'll sometimes see get and sometimes you'll see set. If it's a get, that means we can't modify it, right? Since we created this instance of this class. So how do we get past that? Well, let's go back here. If we're creating this instance here, that's kind of going to be a problem, right? Because I don't think we can actually, oh, we can pass in a nice little implementation here. Let's just do that. So we'll say transition style of scroll, navigation orientation, I think that will be horizontal, and we'll just pass nil here. Let's actually see what that does. This is actually nice. I had a different idea planned, which would be override the initializer, the default initializer to show you guys, but I think we could just do it like this. Yeah, sweet. That works too. So yeah, so go into the app delegate, open up the parentheses, drop in these default initializers, which we can actually use, which is really nice. And you want to use scroll. Now, if you want to use page, you can use page or scroll. Super nice. Okay, great. So we've got so far, I would say 80% of the work done. Now we just need to add a page view or page control at the bottom, right? Okay, so how do we do that? Let's go back into our page controller and let's create a page indicator view. So we'll call this lazy var page view page indicator view. Let's do that. All right, and this will be of a UI page control, and we'll complete that off like that. We'll say let p v equal UI page view control like that. We'll return our pv. And so with a page control, we can set our current page. We can set, there's actually quite a few properties that are kind of nice on here. The number of pages that we want to use, hides for single page, etc. Our tint color, so we can change the color of the little dots that we're going to use. For example, let's set our number of pages actually equal to, and the reason we had to make this a lazy var is so that we can access our self here. Our view controllers list, view controller, we'll just copy this, make it quicker, dot count. Like that, okay? That way that we only get the amount of dots for the number of pages that we're using. Kind of nice, right? Now we're going to pragmatically add this, so we need to set, as always, you guys have seen me do this so many times, our auto-translate resizing mask to false. And let's set the tint color on the dots, because I have a feeling that once we do it, it's going to be kind of hard to see with our crazy colored background view controllers. So we'll just set it to orange. Okay. Awesome. So if we run this right now, we're still not going to get it. And I'll tell you why. It's because we haven't added it pragmatically into our view and constrained it. So let's do that right now. We'll go into our view did load, put in a comment here, and we'll say add in the page view control. And so we'll just say self.view, view, add subview, and we'll say this is the page indicator view. And let's drop some constraints on it. So we'll just do page indicator view. We'll say center X, right? That's the center of the screen. is equal to the constraints of self.view.center x, and we'll set it active is active to true, like that. And that should go or highlight up, and we'll do one more, which will be, we'll set the bottom anchor, and we'll set that constraint to self.view.bottom anchor, and we'll add a constant in here, and we'll say constant, let's do 25. So that would say basically that it is 25 points from the bottom. Let's run that, see what we get. It might be a little high. Okay, awesome, we can see it right here. So here's our page view controller. Now as I swipe, you notice how the dots are not moving? They're not doing anything. And that's actually a couple of reasons. We're gonna actually implement that right now, that logic. So as we go to each page, it's jumping to the next one. We haven't added that yet. The reason it's not showing up orange, now that I realize, is tint color might be a property that's inherited from a UI view, because I'm sure that this inherits from UI control, which inherits from a UI view. We need to use this one, page indicator tint, or page indicator tint view, so like that. Now if we run it, it will be orange. Okay, how do we add in the change of how they change? So now our dots are orange, you can see. But how do we make this dot move for each of these pages? Well, it's pretty simple, right? We adhered to a page view controller delegate, okay, and data source. But if I go into my delegate, right, we've got all these different methods in here. And one of the ones that we want to look at, or actually two of them, is one's going to be called did finish animating and will transition to. And we want to actually use both of these. So I'm going to drop these ones in. We'll just put them down here. And these are actually, this would be more correctly stated, the data source delegate methods. And this would be the page view delegate methods, I guess you could think of it as. And so we'll put that there, and we'll do this. And the other one that we want to actually grab is going to be will transition. Where's that? Here, this top one. Okay. And take out the public. Pretty nice, right? Sweet. Now what do we want to do with these guys? Okay, well, like I said before, the pending index that we created at the top is kind of like a placeholder for the transition animation that we're going to be using. And we're going to actually use that in the will transition. So what I'm going to do is I'm just basically going to say pending index, okay? And will transition to is basically a delegate that's being called because we've assigned our delegate to ourselves before you actually finish this animation swipe, right? The finish one is did finish animating, right? Which would be this one. But the will transition to is basically going to give me a pending view controllers. I guess you could think of it as an array of view controllers that it actually still knows that are active that we can actually use. So we're going to say pending view controller is equal to our view controllers list. Okay, because remember that's all of ours, all of our view controllers index of, right? And this is going to be index of a view controller, right, that we want to use. And so we'll be able to use the pending view controllers that's passed in, and we want the first one out of that because we can't just pass in an entire array in there. Okay, looking pretty nice. And I believe, what does it want? An exclamation. Is that right? Yeah, I guess it would want an exclamation. Wonder why that is. I guess, oh, because this could technically be failable. We could fix that with a guardlet. I guess just let's do this. I guess we'll just leave it for another video. Anyways, because we're running out of time here. The next thing I want to do is in did finish animating, we're going to say if our animation is completed, and I'll show you actually where I get that from. Here, completed is true. So if the animation is completed, and the reason that we're going to check if the animation is completed is this. Check this out. If I slide over, that's completed. I'd let go. But if I slide over and I don't let go, that's not completed. See that? I think if you take it to the 50% mark, or over the 50% mark, 50% is like right there. Take it like right there. See how it goes? Boom. That means it's completed. So the reason they do that is because if you swipe and you're like, actually, I didn't swipe far enough, I maybe don't want to go, and I don't know what I want to do, that's why that's there. So that completed is just checking is, have we fully completed this cycle of turning the page? Okay. Well, if we have, let's set our current index to our pending index, which would be the next one, right? Because we've already established that from down there. And we'll say if let index, okay, equal that current index, like there actually is something there, right? And it's not nil. Then we'll say our page view controller, indicator view, I apologize. Current page, which we can specify at any time, is equal to that index. So this is basically saying, okay, it's saying, let's let this index equal the next item in the array's number, okay? And if that item is there, let's assign our current page. Remember, the current page is the one that's always highlighted. For example, this one, because we haven't implemented this yet, is always 0. So 1, 2. So if the next one is 1 and we're on 0, as soon as we finish completing the animation, right, this is completed, then this will be 1. So it's going to set this index and this page view controllers.current page, which is this highlighting to 1. So let's run this and see what we get. So now as we animate forward and backward, it should observe this delegate. So if I slide over, boom, next one, you notice how it's highlighted, slide over, next one, boom. And same thing, I can go forward, I can go back, I can go forward, I can go back. Okay, that's going to wrap it up for today. If you guys have questions, I know this is kind of long and kind of confusing. These methods, to me, honestly, were the most confusing part. This is a little bit more straightforward, but these can be very confusing, and they can definitely be refactored. I just wrote this probably, I would say, in about 5 to 10 minutes really quickly right now, just to show you guys. And just for that simple fact, you would want to have all these guards. Maybe you want to have them all in one. You definitely don't want to be exposing this exclamation, so please make sure that you're unwrapping your values and checking that they're there. But yeah, I hope this helps. If you guys have any questions, please let me know. All right, have a great